All right, the first thing you are going to do is cut the pieces that are mentioned in the pattern for the block. So I've got my center square cut out, as well as 3 fabrics that I have for kind of the rail fence part. And then I do have my triangles cut and ready to go. So the first thing we're going to do is sew our 3 kind of rail fence pieces together. So they're the 3 longer rectangle pieces. As you can see, you can move from like a dark to a lighter on the outside, or you can mix this up. You just want to make sure that whatever is at the end is different than what you have for the outside 4 corners, because they will be touching, and as well as this larger triangle, which will be on the sides of these 3. So you just need some good contrast between your background area as well as the 3 strips that you have for that section. If there is some blending, that's all right as well. So you can just kind of play with your fabrics, the supplies that you have, and maybe audition a few pieces before you get them cut and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is really just kind of lay these right sides together, and I'm going to chain piece all of this first and seconds together, and then press those when they're all sewn. Now that I have those sections sewn together, I can go ahead and finish sewing kind of that rail fence area by just again chain piecing and laying those pre-sews on top of that single piece using a 1/4 inch seam, and then pressing those as well when it's complete. All right, now that I have those 4 sections done, I can go ahead and kind of lay my block out. So this is again my center block, and then I've got my 4 kind of rail fence parts. Then I've got my 4 triangles that were cut earlier from using the pattern as the instructions. And then lastly, we have our 4 kind of triangles that go at the ends of each of these rail fence strips. So those are going to be kind of the last things we sew. What we're going to start off with is just looking at this row by row. So we're going to take this center rail and we're going to stitch each triangle to both sides. Then we're going to sew these 3 center pieces together and then repeat the 2 triangles on either sides of that rail. When you line this up, what you want to do is make sure that you leave that little triangle at the top. So you line it up on the bottom square corner, and then you will have extra fabric on the top on the triangle, which is just fine. That makes sure that you don't cut off the point or that extra little area when you stitch down that next seam. Now that I have those pieces sewn together, I can go ahead and add those last sections of the center of the block. Again, when we line it up, we're going to make sure we line it up to that square corner and allowing that triangle to be off the edge. All right, now that we have our sections, our 3 kind of rows put together, we can go ahead and start putting these together. So we're going to do the top and the middle section. What you're wanting to do is fussy those seams so they lay opposite each other, and then kind of pin that in place to secure it. Then you're going to do that repeat that with the other side. So those seams are opposite each other and they lay really flat and nice. And just stitch this down and then repeat for the other. So the last part of this block is going to be adding those last triangles to the sides as well as the top and the bottom of this center section. So you've kind of pressed it really nicely, and now you need to just finish the block by laying your triangles down. Again, you should have some of the triangle points coming off of the block itself, and then stitch using a 1/4. All right, so the last step for this block is of course going to be squaring it up. You can see I've got some uneven things happening just depending on your seam allowance and the placement of the fabric and stuff. So just going to take the square ruler to this, refer to the pattern as to what size it needs to be, and trim up those 4 sides so it is squared up and ready to be used in the quilt. So this is going to be made a few times depending on the pattern that it refers to. So check that. Make sure you cut enough fabric and sew up enough blocks to move forward on the